My name is David Smith. Thank you, recording. My name is David Smith. I am the Chief Deputy Commissioner with the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. I have with me today some colleagues. We have Victor Youngblood, who is a retired FSA official, state FSA official, and our go-to person for anything and everything FSA. Weston McCorkle, who is an Ag Programs Administrator and a jack of all trades here in the department. And in Western North Carolina, we have Caleb Rathbone, Assistant Commissioner, and he will be making comments, particularly with respect to the damages from Hurricane Helene. A couple of things here. If you have questions, please put those in the Q&A section on the screen. We will get to those following our presentation. If we can't get to them all, then we will answer otherwise later on during the day and tomorrow. I also want to thank Farm Bureau, North Carolina Farm Bureau, for being the host of this webinar. Without their tremendous participation, it would not really be possible. So with that, Weston, let's go to the first slide. The North Carolina General Assembly directed the Department of Agriculture to implement an ag disaster program. And really, this is two programs in one. They appropriated approximately $311 million, divided that into two parts, 200 million plus about 211 million for Helene and 100 million for non-Helene disasters. That sounds simple, but it is not so simple. We are going to try and go through some of the complexities of this and try and answer your questions. But I know that we will not get to them all. And when you start working with farmers, there will be other questions. So let's be patient. Let's get those questions and let's get this done. So if you would, Caleb, will you start regarding the Helene losses?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So on the, I'll touch on the eligibility. So this eligibility criteria is the same for both Helene and the statewide program. So it has to be a person who experienced a verifiable loss of agriculture or aquaculture commodities or farm infrastructure as a result of a presidential or secretarial declared disaster, including the contiguous counties in 2024. The farm has to be located in an affected area for the respective disaster for that program. And the commodity or aquaculture was planted or being raised before the date of the disaster set forth in the presidential or secretarial declaration for the county in which the commodities or farm infrastructure are located and for which verifiable losses are claimed. Weston, if you'll go to the next slide, please. So here's a map showing the 39 presidential declared counties for Helene. So if a producer has production in these counties, they're eligible to apply for the Helene program. Like I said, there are 39 counties. We recognize that there's a very varying difference in the amount of damage that occurred between some of these counties. So when you're working with farmers or you have questions from farmers about which program should they apply for, the Helene application is for damage that occurred only from Helene. And Victor will go through that in a little bit, but we anticipate the majority of those claims will be in probably 20-25 counties out of the 39, but that's not to say that we won't have a handful from either the far west down in Cherokee or as east as Nash County. Now, remember, if you're a producer in Nash County and you apply for damage from tobacco, for example, that would not cover the drought losses, only losses from Helene. So that's where you would apply. You'd be better off to apply for the statewide program. On the Helene side, we recognize that there's been a lot of there's federal programs through FSA, your traditional loss programs that farmers are have signed up for and starting to receive some payments. This state program is designed in a way that will help cover gaps, things that are left behind that the typical FSA programs are not covering. So things like, the uninsured crop loss, infrastructure, and so forth. Even with that, there will still be gaps depending on how the legislation is written, whether it's funding or eligibility. And so just to note, we are the NCDA, we're working with USDA trying to get additional funds through a state block grant. So we don't yet know details on that, but that is something that we're working on to help cover those additional gaps. So it's the highlights on Helene. Like David said, if you have questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A section, and we will address those at the end of the webinar. But before I turn it over to Victor, just want to say we really appreciate the support from each and every one of you, not only for this program, but also over the last 6 months as we navigated through the disaster that Helene left on our region. So with that, I'll turn it over to Victor.
Hey, I just want to reiterate what Caleb saying earlier about how much we appreciate the county extension staff and also the Farm Service Agency staff. If they can help us as well without you guys, we wouldn't be able to be successful with these type of applications. So we really appreciate that. I also want to say we have some field staff as a resource scattered around the state. We have three located in the mountains and 3 down east that also will be involved with working with application support or some verification support as well. Most of those are retired FSA employees, so they're familiar with how this type of program works. You'll see here that this non-Helene program is statewide. This includes, primary designation from and secretarial and contiguous counties. We got this map from FSA, so we more or less brought out everyone in as eligible for a non-Helene. That means a drought situation, tropical storm Debby situation, and there's a couple other storms, unnamed storms that might have affected the crops in our state this past year. Next slide.
So before we get into the actual application, we'll show you a sample of that. As has been indicated, this program does include all the counties and all disasters from 2024. So should be accepting those applications. We're not going to demonstrate that website today, but you can certainly visit it. It should be very user friendly. We have added some frequently asked questions that we think may be there. Those may be updated over the next 4 weeks. Please note that in that particular document, there is a link for Helene damage application as well as non-Helene disaster application. And that'll be very important to make certain people choose the correct application. Those applications are county specific. So if you have anywhere in the state that you have damage that was not Helene damage or was not related to Hurricane Helene, you'll be able to choose any 100 counties. If you had hurricane damage, which was in those 39 counties, only those 39 will be seen. Relative to what you can do to help is to pass that word. Maybe you can assist an eligible applicant with the application process. We would hope that maybe some of our extension offices across the state may be able to set aside some office hours to be able to bring folks in, maybe offer those Hopefully this will not be a difficult application. There will only be 2 primary documents that have to be uploaded. Those are your FSA 578 2024 producer print, which can be obtained from the local FSA offices. We have sent notification to the FSA offices that would be needed. So hopefully they are prepared. We recognize that they may be stretched a little bit on their staffing at this time. Every applicant will have to complete a sub W-9 or North Carolina sub W-9. They will be listed in our system to be able to get them paid. So that is a link there that will be in the application, as well as it is a resource on the ag disaster webpage. For infrastructure losses that are identified in the application, you would need an insurance adjuster report along with payment receipts, as well as a physical location and a GIS map when possible. That'll just kind of help us to be able to pinpoint those items. Same thing for nursery and tree losses. We'll need a physical location and GIS map when possible. That way our field reps and folks that will be working in the field specific to those nursery and tree crops will be able to know where they're going, get a lay of the land before they contact the applicant. Once again, this application period closes on May the 4th of 2025. So we've got about 4 weeks, folks, to get these things in. That May 4th date is set forth by the legislation. Legislation was again signed on March the 20th, giving us 45 days for that particular process to occur.
So let me just add on the infrastructure losses. We are going to collect that information, but our focus is going to be crop losses. We may not have enough money to adequately address infrastructure losses, and that is really why we want the USDA block grant to help us in that regard.
So I'm going to go to a slide real quickly here, and then we'll move into the application. Just want to make sure that everyone is very well aware that we have an assistance hotline set up. There is your phone number, 866-645-9403. That will be staffed Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. So if folks have questions, they can call that. We're going to operate this much like our emergency operations center during disasters, and that is that you should get a live person between those hours. Anyone who calls is going to provide 7 different items of information: name, email, phone number, and kind of what they're calling about. And then that will be passed along to our subject matter experts. We also have our ag disaster at ncagr.gov email, which will be monitored as well. So that will be able to be emailed to, and on the 800 number, there will be a voicemail box. So if somebody happens to call after 5 p.m., we'll be checking those voicemails each morning, and then randomly through the day in the event that we've had an overwhelming number of calls. I know that Victor's excited about his application, so we're going to move and let you kind of see what that application is going to look like. And if you give me a moment to change that screen, we're going to move into what that particular looks like here. All right. And hopefully all of you can see what we've got here, and we'll work through this particular thing. Sorry that it's I'm gonna scale it down a little bit, and hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit more of the page that's there. This is also available on the website. Each of these samples of the application would be underneath where you see the application. There's a tab to click down. There's a link to the application, and there's a link to the sample. And just note that the sample is not to be, everything has to be electronically submitted, but at least this allows somebody to know the information that they're going to need to provide. So with that, Victor, it's all yours.
All right. So this application is that we're going to talk about first here is the Helene application targeted toward our mountain areas. When you get into the application, you'll notice that we want one submitted per county per tax identification number. So if you're a multi-county producer, you're going to have more than one application that you need to submit the record for, because we have to keep track of it by county. We want for you to apply just like you would apply with a local farm service agency farm record. And we encourage you, if you yet to have a farm record established at your local office, by all means, please contact them and request to have a farm record established. We need to have that in place for our particular disaster application as well. We want the 2024 Farm Service Agency producer print to match your application to help us with our verification process. You will notice that there'll be some required entries as you go along into the application. One important note is if we'd like to have the uploads in a PDF format. You know, a lot of times people like to use their phones. I understand that, but it's an easy way to try and apply. However, if you're not really an expert in taking pictures and knowing the technology to do that, we would suggest trying to upload this application using a personal computer. But if you're good at using your phone and you can capture documents and sign it and really look really nice to upload, then you can go ahead and try that. If you do that, we've got a little link. We want you to use the most compatible format of the document to upload. For instance, if you're using an iPhone, then we have a link that you can go in and kind of read about how to do that. But it suffices to say, for an iPhone, under settings, and you go to camera, you'll have a format setting option there. And the makers of iPhone automatically set that up for a file that we can't use. So if you'll change that to most compatible option, then that's going to upload that particular form in a compatible format. So I hope that helps you out there. The substitute W-9 is, you can complete that online. If you have a software available to do electronic signature, you can do that. If not, we encourage you to just have your extension person help you print the form off, sign it to the bottom, and then scan it into their PC to help you, and then you can attach it to the application. I hope that makes sense.
Victor, let me just chime in for a moment on the sub W-9, in that I've had lots of experience with it. We have to have the sub W-9. That's a requirement of the state controller's office. And when you fill it out, you have to fill it out just like you file your taxes. Any variation, any non-compatibility, it will be denied, and we'll have to spend time with you trying to figure out what the problem is. So it needs to be exactly like you file taxes.
Okay, thank you, David. And then one other thing before we get to the meat of the application is, once you create an account, a new user account, and you go into the application, you can save your progress and jump back out. But it's really important that when you go back in, that you select the option of returning user at that point, and then that will automatically put you back into the document you started, and you can edit it from there. So the bottom line, one time as a new user, and then come back in as a returning user. And then you'll see here, if you go to the screen, we always want you to sign an affidavit, basically that you're submitting the information is true about your crop loss or infrastructure loss, and you just sign your full name there at the bottom, click yes, and not sign it, but type it in. Go next. These are the counties that you can select for your loss. Like Caleb mentioned earlier, it may be that we want the growers to select the loss that occurred. Like if it's Helene messed up your crop or infrastructure, we want you to apply for Helene. If you're in one of these counties that maybe were outside the most damaging events, then if basically you say, well, drought really caused my loss, then we would suggest that you take the non-Helene application to complete that. So, but not really both. We want you to decide which loss criteria affected your crops the most and decide that way. So you can select your county, move forward with the application at this point. And then we want you to, put in the information about your tax identification number or your, like your social security number if you're individual or a single member LLC, or if you're an entity, that type of identification number of how you farm, I guess, and then choose that, and then you're going to want to input that number as you have at for your farming operation. What is that number? It's 9 digits that you would input, no dashes in the application. You're limited to 9 digits, so you put whatever social security or EIN number at that point in time. Then we want you to, after you get that information, and then it's time to complete your substitute W-9. If you've got it ready ahead of time on your desktop or somewhere on your phone, if you'd want to do that, you can attach it here by choose the file. That takes you to wherever you've got the form located. You just click on it, open, it says open or whatever, and it moves it right into the application. Real simple. Then you're good to go. If you need a copy of the form, there's a link there for the substitute W-9. You can click on that. It'll bring the form up in a new window, and you can deal with filling it out. And then saving it off and get ready to attach it back in if you want to go that route as well. And
We would encourage folks in advance from the website to download that form and complete it in advance of really getting into the application. But again, you can do it from here. But if folks are calling or you talk to folks, 2 things that they can be doing is getting out 578 and getting their sub W-9 already filled out in advance of starting this application.
And one other item that always comes up, and I forgot to mention, sorry, is on the substitute W-9, there's a block 13 that we have to fill out, and it's basically there's an other box in that section, and you want to either check it, put an X in it, and then underneath it you type in farmer or landowner or something, or write it in if you're doing this by handwritten. So that's something a little different, but it's required on our side to deal with this form. And then we want you to basically put in your mailing address and phone number, email address. This is how we're going to contact you if we need to, or get back with you if something is not quite right or needs to be corrected in the application. And you can submit that there. Once you've got all that squared away and you start into the meat of the application about what we're after, and we're going to first start out with nursery products, and turf and Christmas trees and apple trees and other type of commercial trees or that were destroyed or damaged by Hurricane Helene. If that's your case, you just click yes, and you can choose which type of nursery market you're involved in, container, all these type of plants and size that we've got established here. And you can see that's quite a few choices. And then like the number lost during the storm, we want to know, how many plants were lost. So we'll have that information to as we move forward. For our nursery folks. We understand this will be a pretty heavy workload in the mountains. There's a lot of nurseries that got damaged. We realize that in some of those areas. We can move down to turf. Those are choices there for turf that got flooded. And you can choose, and we want that in square feet on the actual farm that that damage occurred. We also have some specialty crops available. Hemp, I don't know if we might have some hemp in the mountains. I don't think we have much out beyond that. But you can see some of the choices of the crops there. One question, if you have a really small farm that just happen to have some hemp for floral use that we have, you might have some of that. It may be in a very small quantity. Even though we don't really have a place for individual containers, just if it's 0.1 of an acre, put 0.1 and we'll try to locate or to deal with it that way. And the damaged acres. And then down on here, commercial trees, vines. We got a section for Christmas trees and apple trees. What we're after there is number loss and what growing stage they're at. So we're going to attempt to take this information and try to come up with a value of it lost. We know FSA has a TAP program, which is about replanting those particular species, but we're going to deal with the actual market loss of it and try to come up with some cost share to help compensate for the commercial trees that were lost. Same thing for field grown nursery stock. We have a lot of that in the foothills area. And then it's hard to capture everything that someone may have. So you just check if it doesn't fit in those boxes, check the other and just tell us the type of tree and number lost. You can just type that in there in that description, and we'll go from there. If it's something supplemental documentation for other is something that's out of the norm besides another species of fruit tree, then you might want to help us out by submitting some documentation about exactly what it is, so we can go with it from there. That's not a required field, but it helps if it's not something that's common, let's say. So that's the goal of nursery and tree species. Our next section, you can click yes or no, move on, and we want to know exactly where it is, like the physical location, the tree damage, and a nice map maybe, so we can put our hands on it. Some of you growers have farm surface safety, farm track maps maybe that you could upload. Those are nice if you have that available at your house. If not, regular what you say, regular type map that you could get off of, I guess, a web page or something that would notate where this is on your farm or what farm had the loss there. So as you move down, there's always a spot. There is a spot for aquaculture damage for Helene, and if you have that category, we just kind of want to know what your species was. Give us some explanation about that loss, and you'll see that upload FSA aquaculture related loss. What we're after there is when we decide to pay on this, we'll want to know, did you have a FSA term, a non-insured program payment that occurred for your aquaculture, or an emergency livestock assistance program payment? If you have one of those two things that you can upload, that would be great to help us out, so we can determine our payment based off what FSA paid and not overlap that way. Okay, next section is the crops. And it's going to ask you, did you have crop damage? This is where we're going to want your FSA 2024 578 producer print form. That one, it can be any FSA office can generate that form for you. If you contact them, just say, hey, can you email me that form, or extension can do that. And they can send it right over, email it in a PDF format, which is handy. and to attach to our applications. So if you have crop damage, then you're gonna be able to choose quite a few crops in the Helene area that suffer damage. These are crops primarily that you would see planted or right around the time the storm happened. And so if that affected you, then you choose the crops and the acres involved, acre damage. If you've got 50 acres of, I don't know, tomatoes, but you really only had 10 acres that got damaged in your farm, then we really just want your 10 acres of damage to deal with. That goes about with any crop in that scenario. We want to deal with the damaged acres. Then at the end, there's a place for other if you want to, if there's some crop we didn't hit that we can see if we can deal with, we'll go with that. But these are kind of the normal crops in place during the summer and the fall in this type of law. Then you're going to upload your producer print here. And then you completed your crop section, you move on to another section, talked about harvested commodities and crops, I guess it got damaged because of that were stored and you had a power outage and it got spoiled or something, couldn't be used after that. So we got some choices here of baled hay or harvested silage, tons lost, if that hits your situation. If you, in that particular case, on the feed, we know that FSA has a emergency livestock assistance program that's targeted toward livestock producers. So if that's you, we'd like to have that. So we, would consider their payment when we make ours. Sometimes if you're a commercial hay producer or feed, any other type of animal feed that you just harvest and you sell to other people, you probably weren't eligible for the ELAP, so you wouldn't upload here. We would take your application if that occurred for you and determine our payment rate as well. Then we've added this one came up. We got a lot of reports about power outages during the storm. So we got an option to plug in if you had stored commodities, cold storage like apples or any other fruit. And we want to know what was the approximate value that was lost, and you just give them a value. We'll probably follow up with you later on that. But this gives an idea about how much loss occurred here. So we know what kind of money we're talking about. And if there's any other type of product loss, you can describe it here. We're looking for raw commodities. We're not looking for a retail business that might have suffered loss. This is farm harvested raw commodities stored that just because of the storm or power outage, it just lost a lot of money in that scenario. So, and then the next section here is infrastructure. That's a wide range of different types of infrastructure that we're going to try and capture here as best we can. We're talking about greenhouses in particular, barns, farm equipment, other structures, improvements for farming purposes that USDA couldn't cover. For instance, we want you to describe what that is to us. And if you, let me just go over a little bit about what we may see here. It's like a hoop house, like you say, normal greenhouse. We have all different types of greenhouses as well. Crop support systems like trellis systems for apples in particular, or some other support system for vineyard. That's kind of an example of what we're looking at. If you've replaced it, we'd like to know what your estimate was your loss and what it cost you to replace it. You can take scan that or something, upload that for us. If you had insurance coverage on it, that covered some kind of flooding, I know that's kind of rare, but if you had it, we'd like to know what that was and give that to us as well. And then last block here is farm roads and bridges and culverts. We're gonna capture this and try to move that to Division of Soil and Water for them to authenticate and deal with. We realize there's a lot of farm roads destroyed, a lot of culverts messed up, and then these access to timber areas on farms, these bridges, access roads that got messed up. We're gonna try and capture some of that and find out where it is. I know that's expensive too, but we're still gonna we want to utilize that hopefully for our USDA block grant to try and cover. It's a lot of informational needs, but it's really helpful as we move forward. And then lastly, we added this in, the North Carolina legislature was interested in, were there pockets of land that for debris removal and stream bank restoration or cropland restoration that USDA just didn't adequately cover in your mind. We want to know if that was the case, and you just give us some estimated costs associated with it. And we'll just kind of get that information and move forward from that as well. We know that FSA has been busy in the mountains with ECP applications, and that's ongoing. But in your case, if something happened in those programs that you just didn't cover your specific situation, that's where we kind of want to know there. And then when you get to the end of the application, and everything's looking good, you got all your forms, it gives you a little confirmation of what you put in, as you can look over. If everything's good to go, the most important part about this application is you hit the submit button. You click it. By clicking it, then that finalizes it as a completed application, and you also get a confirmation through email of exactly what you inputted into the application. So which is a good little record that you would have. Every record that's captured in this application has a unique reference number, and that will show up on your email confirmation, and that's a good way that we can identify applications as well on our end. So that's the end. That's quite comprehensive for the mountain areas. We know they had a lot of damage in these areas, but that's your application.
The non-Helene application is not nearly as complicated, so we're not going to go over that, but very similar, but not nearly as complicated. So, Victor, thank you for going through that application. And Weston, I see we have a few questions in the Q&A. Let's take a peek at those and see what they are.
All right. One of the first questions was asked was, can a producer apply for both Helene and non-Helene? So some counties would be both.
I think that is possible. We anticipate it will be rare, because you've got to decide where the most damage is possible, but we think it will be rare, and most likely if that happens, you'll be getting follow-up questions from us.
And to kind of follow up with that for David, in those counties, we may see that there was some crops that, and it's another question asked a little farther down, is that there may be crops which were harvested prior to Helene that would be on the non-Helene form, and then you would be able to submit a second application for crops that were damaged by Helene. So that is a little bit tricky in those 39 counties possibly, but do be thinking about that as well. So is something there, and we'll work through that with y'all.
And I want to add one thing about the non-Helene. As Weston was saying, we included small grain in that one because of the drought condition. And we have several crops to choose from that mostly were awarded through the FSA county offices this past summer. We might have missed a few. There's not an other column. But in those particular, I guess the main focus is our traditional crops that we know are planted in our state that are affected by the drought or Debby. That's our focus for the non-Helene application. Yeah, go ahead.
Questions asked for specialty crop or uninsured crop producers. What type of alternate form is acceptable versus the 578? You want to take that one?
Yeah, I guess, are they referring to nursery?
So I think we've probably addressed most of that in the presentation here. And in those particular specialty cases, it may be worth a phone call or worth an email for us to work with that particular producer, or if you're an extension agent or another farm support staff out there, whether it be crop insurance or through FSA officer or others that may be joining us today, just reach out to us and we'll work with you on that. Those 578s, if a producer did not file a 578 during the past year, and we've very much encouraged folks with that throughout Hurricane Helene, make certain you've contacted those offices. You can reach out to your local FSA office and they should be able to complete a late file form for that.
But just remember, we're dealing with bona fide farmers.
Yeah.
We're not dealing with someone who may have a large garden. It's a bona fide farmer.
Well, we've answered the next one there. Question, are these the same accounts used when people applied for the frost freeze damages a couple years ago? This would not be the same account. A new account would have to be established. It is the same program that's being utilized, so but it would need to be a new login.
That's correct.
Question here is a pretty important question, is what happens if an applicant does not have internet or a computer access?
Good
Well,
point.
that's a good question, but we really encourage file this electronically through extension office, or perhaps there's another governmental entity that can assist. A family member, a public library. There are lots of ways to do it, but for us, it really was helpful if it is in electronic form.
And we have an interesting question here, which we may have to get back to on this one. It says, can you address on non-timber forest producers if they qualify, as well as medicinal herbs and mushrooms and the light specialty crops? We may need to get back to that.
I think we'll need to get back on that one.
We'll try to add that back in later. For small producers, how should they input crop loss if growing on less than 1 acre? I think did you?
Yeah,
address
just
that?
put it like 0.1 It's fine.
Okay,
And I think, David, that pretty much, one question, infrastructure clarifications include fencing for livestock. That is not included, with this particular application. And of course, you can note on there in regard to infrastructure, if that is a loss that was had. And we'll be looking at those.
We felt like, in our discussions with FSA, that the ECP practice that deals with fencing was really quite robust in that particular area. So that's why we chose not to include it in this application.
Question asked here, if a farmer has a social security number, but uses a tax identification number for Schedule F, which should they use? They should use whichever one they would prefer to have that check written to and how they would like it to report. But if they report underneath the TIN, that's what they will need to complete on the sub W-9. If they fill a report out with a social security number, then that's what they'll want to do. But in relation to that, that is how they will receive that payment. Is based upon that tax ID number and the registered name that is associated with it.
are the, any other substantial questions, Weston? Because I hate to use that word substantial, because every question is a good question. But we will try and answer all of these, even if we haven't voiced them right here.
I have one more question here, David. I think we can hit the last two maybe. For haying and grazing land, does there have to be any proof of monetary loss for this to apply for non-Helene areas for drought or other damage? Would encourage you to fill out the form, make note of that acreage relative to the drought, and know that there's no request for monetary documentation at this point in time. But we encourage folks to fill out that application, make sure that it's in the system by May the 4th, and then some of those follow-ups may be done later on. And then I have one final question down here, David. Let me see if it's something we need to answer. Last time we ran into an issue with the value of watermelons. There are big differences in the value of melons comparing large seeded to small seedless. Will there be one value for watermelons?
I don't know that we can answer that question right now. We have engaged the services of Dr. Blake Brown and Kelly McAdams to help us, two noted economists to help us with questions like that. So we will be working through those situations. That it?
That should be it. We remind everyone, it is ncagr.gov/ag disaster. The email address is agdisaster@ncagr.gov. And the phone number, which I'm gonna have to look that up, is 866-645-9403. All the information that we've provided here today is available on the website. We'll be making some updates to those FAQs. And David, would you like to wrap up with any additional pieces?
Sure, I understand the recording will be posted on our website, so get a chance to look at Caleb and me one more time if you want to. May 4 is the deadline. That is very important. Midnight, May 4 is very important, so we don't want people to wait till the last minute and try and get the information in and have a glitch. But we do say, please have your application started. If you've got your application started by May 4, we can finish it a few days later. That is very important. I will say that's it. Thank you for your attention. I really enjoyed it. We look forward to working with you, and thank you very much.